Hello and welcome back to another video where today I am going to be talking about the supposed Resident Evil 3 Remake Nemesis Edition. So for those of you who aren't aware, back in September there was a leak saying that at Tokyo Game Show Resident Evil 3 will be getting kind of like a director's cut or a definitive edition that will be called Resident Evil 3 Nemesis Edition. So in this video I'm going to be going over all that was said about the supposed game and seeing how likely they would be and if I think that this edition will ever come out. So the website I'm using to get the information is an article from Game Rant that I will leave in the description below if you would like to read it. But the first thing on the list is new weapons, enemies and cutscenes. Now I do think if there was going to be a definitive edition, then new weapons do seem very likely, as they're not that hard to make compared to like new enemies or cutscenes. You can just kind of maybe carry over some from previous games and stuff like that. But new enemies, there's a couple that I would want to see. The first one would want to be the Gravedigger, as that was in the original RE3 but was in the remake. And also crows, they just didn't appear in the remake at all. The reason was because there wasn't even the park place that Jill could go to. So we'll talk about that a little bit later once we get to new locations. And talking about new cutscenes, I mean, if there's going to be new eras of the game, then you would expect there would be new cutscenes. But maybe they would just be like little shorter voice clips that do references to maybe like Village or the RE4 remake. Or if they actually did go in and record and mocap entirely new cutscenes, then maybe we could see some of like the more backstory of some of the side characters, such as Murphy, Tyrell, or Dio Rosso, who was literally in the opening of the game for like 2 minutes, and then that's what you saw from him. So maybe some bit more backstory on them would be quite cool. The next is the return of old areas, and this is something that definitely should be in the hypothetical Nemesis edition. So obviously the more prominent locations that were cut were the Raccoon City Park, which is where Jill would have fought the Gravedigger as well as the crows. Also the graveyard as well, and the Dead Factory. Now the Dead Factory was sort of, kind of, not really in the actual game. I'm guessing some people would say that the factory-like location that Jill goes through towards the start of the game, that could be seen as a factory, but that to me doesn't really count. But I definitely think that these locations would be a good thing if they would bring them back. And also the Dead Factory was kind of replaced by the second nest, but still they could find a way of having them both in the game, I'm sure. Like maybe you go to the Dead Factory, then underneath it is the Nest Lab, but then they'd have to refigure it with the story, so I'm not quite sure how they do that. But definitely the park, the graveyard, and also the clock tower. As we did go to the clock tower in the actual remake, but we didn't go inside, as we only had the fight with Nemesis outside, and then that was it. So I think seeing them locations again would be quite cool. And lastly is actually quite a big thing, and that is a reworked Nemesis. Now I have not really a theory, but kind of like from observation, that the reason why Nemesis is quite underwhelming in the 3 remake is because they gave most of his attributes and stalking ability to Mr. X in the RE2 remake, and I'm guessing if they did the same with Nemesis, people would complain. So the whole reason we're buying these remakes is to see games that we love from years ago with like a new coat of paint. So I think if they did do the same thing with Nemesis, then I don't think people would be too mad, because that's what he was like in the actual original game. Also it's saying that in the new hypothetical Nemesis version, he will be stalking Jill around Raccoon City more, and he'll be able to go into more safe areas, which, I mean, yeah, that would be cool, as in the actual 3 remake, like in some places he just doesn't go in, which is a bit odd. But yeah, I definitely think a reworked Nemesis would actually be very good and beneficial for a potential Nemesis edition. So overall, how likely do I think it is that we're going to be getting a Nemesis Edition of Resident Evil 3. I don't think it'll be too likely, as at the moment Capcom are working on the DLC for Village, Revelations 3, Resident Evil 4 Remake, and potentially Resident Evil 9. So I doubt they would just find the time to go back to a game they previously released like a year after release. I mean, I know they're doing the DLC with Village, but they said quite soon after the game's release they will actually be doing that, so we know that's coming. But sadly, I doubt we will see a Nemesis edition of the game. If one does get announced and released, then I will be very surprised and I will buy it, and then I will do a follow-up video on it, but I don't think we will see one anytime soon. But that's all I have for this video. If you've liked it, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in another video.